Derek's heart raced as the man in the dark suit approached, his cold, emotionless gaze locking onto him. The tension between them was palpable, as though the very air around them had thickened. Derek could feel his pulse in his throat, his hands clammy and trembling slightly as he tried to keep his composure. He had no idea who this man was, but he knew he was one of them. One of the people who had watched him, tracked him, and now, it seemed, had come to collect. "Mr. Johnson," the man said again, his voice low, almost soothing, but with an underlying threat that Derek could feel. "I think it's time we had another conversation." Derek tried to swallow his fear. His mind raced with questions, but the first one that burst forth was the most immediate. "What do you want from me?" The figure took another step closer, his eyes narrowing slightly as he studied Derek's face. "What we've always wanted," he replied. "You, Mr. Johnson, are a part of something much bigger than yourself, and you've been given a choice: to remain where you are, powerless, or to join us and step into a future where you have more than just freedom. You'll have control." Derek clenched his jaw. "I don't want control. I want justice. I want to see the people who wronged me held accountable." The figure's lips curled into a faint, almost pitying smile. "Justice? You think that's something that exists in the world you live in? The system you believe in? You were lucky to get out of prison at all. You really think the courts will protect you now? You're marked, Derek. You've been targeted by people who don't care about right or wrong, only power, and they'll stop at nothing to break you." Derek felt a cold shiver run down his spine. His mind flashed back to the trial, the prosecutor's smug face, the judge's cold indifference, the biased eyes of the jury. He had been just one man, facing a system built to crush people like him. The Covenant was right. They had all the power in the world. And yet Derek was still fighting. But now, as he stood in front of this stranger, the truth hit him with full force. He could never escape them. They were a part of the world he lived in now. They were the hidden hands that controlled the system, the strings that made it all move. The figure saw the hesitation in Derek's eyes and pressed on. "The offer is simple, Mr. Johnson. Join us. We can protect you, make you untouchable. All you have to do is accept that the world is not as it seems. You can fight against it and be destroyed, or you can rise above it and become the man you were meant to be." Derek swallowed hard. "And if I refuse?" The man's smile disappeared, replaced by an icy coldness. "Then you will continue to be a pawn in a game you don't even understand. You'll keep fighting for justice, but justice won't come for you. Not when the odds are stacked against you like they are now." Derek thought of everything he had lost, the years he had spent fighting, the friends and family he had alienated in his quest for a better life. He had always believed in the idea of justice, of fairness, but what had it brought him? His life had been shattered by people who had no care for right or wrong. And now, standing in front of this man, Derek realized something he had always tried to deny. The world was bigger than him, and the forces at play were beyond anything he had ever imagined. But could he really give in? Could he let them win? Could he live with himself if he became a part of the system he despised? The man in the suit stood before him, waiting for an answer. The silence stretched on for what seemed like an eternity. Derek's mind was torn in two, each side pulling him in a different direction. The man's offer was tempting, but what would it cost him? His integrity, his soul. "You've already made your choice, Derek," the man said, his voice cutting through the silence. "The question is whether you'll accept it." Derek could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him, crushing him. He could feel his resolve beginning to waver, the temptation of power and security gnawing at his mind. It would be so easy to accept, to step into the world the Covenant promised, to never have to worry again, to finally have the strength to fight back against the system that had always held him down. But then a thought struck him, the thought of the people who had fought alongside him, the people who had believed in him, his family, his friends, his community. Could he live with himself if he betrayed them? Could he turn his back on everything he had fought for? No. The answer was clear now. I refuse, Derek said, his voice steady. I will not be a part of this. Not now. Not ever. The figure's eyes darkened, his lips tightening into a thin line. You don't understand, Derek. You can't win this fight alone. You'll be crushed. The system will break you, and when it does, there will be no one left to stand with you. I don't need the system. I don't need the covenant, Derek replied, his resolve firm. I need justice, and I will fight for it no matter the cost. For a moment, the figure seemed to study Derek, his gaze unwavering. And then, without a word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. Derek stood there, the weight of the moment hanging in the air. He had made his choice. He had refused the power the covenant offered. But now the true battle began. As Derek walked away from the street corner, he could feel the world shifting around him. The weight of his decision, while relieving, was also terrifying. He had turned his back on the covenant, but he knew they wouldn't let him go that easily. The battle wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. Derek didn't know what the future held, but one thing was clear. He had chosen the harder path, and it would not be easy, but he would face it. He would face the system that had wronged him. He would face the covenant, and he would fight for what he knew to be right. The fight for justice, he realized, wasn't just about winning. It was about standing up no matter the cost. Derek's footsteps echoed in the empty streets, his mind racing as the gravity of his decision settled in. He had rejected the covenant. He had chosen justice over power. But with that choice came a new kind of weight, a weight that pressed down on him, unrelenting. As he walked, he couldn't shake the feeling that his world had shifted, and not in a way he could control. The shadows felt darker now. The city seemed more hostile. Derek's defiance had made him a target. The covenant wouldn't forget his refusal. He could feel it. They were already preparing to make an example of him. Every time a car drove by, every time someone glanced his way, Derek felt a ripple of fear. It was no longer paranoia. It was a reality he could not escape. They were watching him. They always had been. And now, Derek knew the price of defiance would be more than just threats. 2 days after his confrontation with the man in the dark suit, Derek woke to find his apartment in disarray. His front door, which he had locked before going to bed, was ajar. He stepped inside cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. His eyes scanned the room. Nothing seemed out of place, nothing, except the feeling of violation that hung heavy in the air. His safe had been tampered with. His most important documents, his financial records, his personal items, everything had been rifled through. As he inspected further, Derek's stomach sank. It was more than just a robbery. It was a message. Someone had left something behind. On the floor next to his desk was a single white envelope. He picked it up with trembling hands, turning it over to find no return address. Inside, there was a single sentence written in cold, precise handwriting. You should have joined us. The covenant had made their move, and they weren't playing around. Derek's pulse quickened as he crumpled the letter in his hand. This wasn't just a warning. This was the first of many strikes to come. He could already feel the walls closing in. They had made it clear. His life was no longer his own. They would take everything from him, piece by piece, until he had nothing left but the choice they had offered him, power or ruin. The following days were a blur of anxiety and paranoia. Derek couldn't shake the feeling that they were always just around the corner, waiting for him to slip up. He tried to go about his day as usual, but everything felt off. People on the street watched him too closely. Even the simplest errands, like picking up groceries, seemed like calculated risks. He couldn't do this alone. Not anymore. He needed help, and the only person he trusted now was Sandra, his lawyer. She had been the one person who had stood by him through the trial, and while she wasn't equipped to handle the shadows of the covenant, she knew the system better than anyone. One night, Derek called her. The urgency in his voice was unmistakable. Sandra, I need to see you, he said. This is bigger than I thought. The covenant, they're coming after me. Sandra, having heard the stress and fear in his voice, agreed to meet. They rendezvoused at a small cafe, far from the prying eyes of anyone who might be listening. "Sandra, they know everything about me," Derek said, his voice low, the weight of his fear pressing down on him. "I don't know how much more I can take. They've already started. They're in my apartment. They've left a message, and I think they've been watching me for months." Sandra's face grew pale as she listened, the gravity of the situation sinking in. "Derek, I don't know much about these people, but I know enough to tell you. You've made enemies with the most dangerous kind. This isn't just about law or justice anymore. This is about survival. You're going to need more than just me if you want to get out of this alive." "I don't know what to do," Derek muttered. "They're everywhere. They have eyes on every corner, and no matter where I turn, they're there. I can't fight this on my own." Sandra placed a hand on his. "No, Derek, you're not alone. I'm going to help you, but we need to be strategic. The Covenant is not something you can take on head-to-head. They have too much power. We need to find a way to outsmart them." Derek looked at her, a glimmer of hope flashing in his eyes for the first time in days. "What do we do?" Sandra's eyes narrowed as she thought. "We fight smart. We expose them for who they are, one piece at a time. We use the law, the system they've manipulated, against them. But it's not going to be easy, and we can't do it without gathering information. We'll need to dig deeper into their network." Over the next few weeks, Sandra and Derek began to put their plan into motion. They worked late into the night, digging through legal documents, tracking down sources who might know something about the Covenant, and consulting old allies who had dealt with shady organizations in the past. They even reached out to a few trusted journalists who specialized in exposing corruption and systemic abuse of power. But every time they uncovered a new lead, Derek felt the noose tighten around him. The Covenant was always one step ahead. They were watching, listening. Derek knew they couldn't keep moving like this for long. Every move they made was risky, every conversation, every phone call under constant surveillance. The pressure was unbearable, but there was no turning back. Derek had made his choice. He would fight for justice, even if it meant risking his life. But now, with Sandra's help, he had a fighting chance. Together, they were preparing to take on the monster that had haunted Derek for so long. But the Covenant wasn't just waiting in the shadows. They had plans of their own. Derek had been a thorn in their side for too long. The game was reaching its final stage. One evening, as Derek sat alone in his apartment, he received a call. It was an unknown number, but he knew who it was before he even answered. "You should have joined us, Derek," the voice said, cold and unyielding. "Now you've forced our hand." Derek's blood ran cold. "What do you want from me?" "We don't want anything from you," the voice replied. "We'll take what's ours. Your life, your freedom, and your loved ones. All of it." Derek's heart raced as the voice on the other end continued. "We will break you. No one can escape the Covenant." And with that, the line went dead. Derek stared at his phone, his mind racing. They were no longer playing games. They had sent a message, and it was clear. The time for running was over. The battle for justice had now become a battle for survival. He had to make one final decision, one that would shape the rest of his life.